You guys can see me? It's good. It's in a way it's but it's from the screen, so I like the idea. When Claire and Polymnia invited me to come to talk in the Becoming Press event, that would be like concerning my book, I wanted to make somehow the genealogy of this schizo journey that is unconscious television. But I also want to step a little bit further. So what is the development of the theory and the clinical practice that I've been elaborating with moving images after unconscious television was released? So first I'm gonna start with the story of this schizo journey, and then I go with like what's going on now in terms of like clinical theory. So I am part of this project at the Nova Institute of Philosophy that is called Film and Death. It is a project that is funded by the European Research Council, and there is this professor from the Nova Institute of Philosophy who proposed that to film philosophize, meaning that to philosophize using moving images instead of maybe words, so using like time-based media to make philosophy, it is a way of meditating about death. And then she got this funding and she started elaborating on this concept of the death image. And she opened the positions, and I got one of the positions for the investigation. And the reason I got this position is because I was the one that was trying to talk about the death drive with moving images. But I didn't want to talk about Freud and moving images in a way that I was looking for meaning and representations of death. I was trying to look for intensities of transformation that we can understand with the death drive. So especially because my background would be Guattari more than Lacan, but also because I studied the novel of Lacan, I wanted to go beyond the limit of the Oedipus complex when I was looking to the images. So I was trying always to push a little bit further on this understanding of like representation within cinema. And then I got this idea that I maybe should not be looking into cinema, I should be looking into television. And then it comes the story. Before going into television, I just want to say about this diagram of Lacan, because Lacan uses this diagram in seminar 20. That is the seminar that is called Encore. So we can say encore is something that should be doing again. So you say encore for a band when a band has to play some songs after the concert, but encore is also the body. So encore, so something that is an affecting body. The problem with Lacan is that Lacan is going to say that the body is an effect of the symbolic. And going beyond Lacan, especially working with the Guattari schizoanalysis, I wanted to think how the body would counterattack the symbolic and the world and produce virtualities of like other worlds from the materiality of the word here. So my proposition of the death image for this project, and that's how Unconscious Television became a book, was to maybe see the possibility of doing a short circuit between two categories of the Lacanian thinking. So it would be a short circuit between the imaginary and the real. Instead of doing this always mediating symbolic thing that would be the clinic of psychoanalysis. I love this diagram because it's very clear. I can translate like Lacanian theory here with this diagram. Lacan is going to divide the unconscious and our like lives in the world into these three categories. The imaginary would be libidinal investments and your relation with the myth, and especially you being this thing that should be what is necessary to complete what is lacking in the other. And the other being the symbolic, being culture, being something that is stoked by a myth, a mythological thing that would be the complex of Oedipus. So this would be the imaginary, where you invest and how you invest your libido into this narrative that should be completed. Most of us, when we go to psychoanalysis, your psychoanalyst is going to try to elaborate this within a familistic realm. So how your mom and your father and your grandmother and your aunt think about you and where you should be placed there in that family. The problem for me is that the mediation to the imaginary would always be concerned with a symbolic castration. That would be the familistic myth. So you are existing there to replace what is lacking for the big other, because the big other is the symbolic. So you are always in a relationship there. And for Lacan, the condition of desire would be, and that's a huge problem for me, but the condition for desire would be to produce some representation that in the end of your analysis, you understand that it's only phallic representation to deal with this imaginary gap that you're always feeling. The real is precisely what doesn't describe very much in the symbolic, but can be obtained by the relationship with object A, that for Lacan is the basis of all representation. And I think even Lyotard would agree with this intense basis of all representation. That's the most important concept that Lacan has ever made. This thing that goes between the symbolic and the real, that is not representation per se, but is always this potency that is untranslatable, that is like always radical somehow. But the problem is that Lacan is always going to put this little a in relation to the bigger A, that is the autre. For Guattari, we should take this A and do it maybe as a non-object, as exactly what refutes representation and refutes existing in this symbol. If for Lacan the real is impossible, for Guattari and Deleuze, I think it's actually Guattari influencing Deleuze, the impossibility is the symbol. That's why we always, in this schizoanalytic realm, we always impregnated with a language to come. We are always impregnated with a symbolic that is not yet there. And that's actually the most difficult part of schizoanalysis, but is the most important thing that it teaches us. How can we listen to someone in the practice of psychoanalysis or schizoanalysis, but I'm going to say psychoanalysis, yes, or contemporary psychoanalysis, without looking for the basis of any representation? Actually, not having your desire as a desire of the big other that comes from the symbolic, but a desire for another symbolic that is impossible, but is yet to come. So that's maybe the paradoxical, the impossible quest, but that's the beautiful thing. And my proposition, working in this ERC project, is to think that maybe death images, so the images that my colleague and PI, the main investigator, Susana Viegas, proposes, maybe this concept of death image is precisely this image that's gonna destroy all the layers of this geological strata of representation. And how can we do this? How can we deal with moving images with this in mind? Looking for like micro-perceptions, and that's a Deleuzian concept after Leibniz and Default, like micro-perceptions that are singular yet multiple, that are always in disentanglement with the world, but looking for something that is not like in the world per se, but it's a virtuality in the world. So these micro-perceptions maybe would be the death image, images that a single individual in the individualization process can notice, but it's maybe untranslatable, and it's not a basis for another representation. It's a basis for a radical other symbolic that maybe is not structured with language, that maybe is structured, and that's my hypothesis, with like haptic images. And then that's the diagram here I wanted, and that's my thing there. I want to put object A between the imaginary and the real. How can we produce images from the body? And then that's the point that I propose in the introduction of unconscious television. Language is not a technology. Language is no transcendent bird like big other that produces the unconscious. Language is a secretion of the body. Language is sweat, is cum, is spit. It's something that the body is constantly producing. Language is exactly what Zora, the dog that I have in my house, that is part of my life in every day, is doing when she barks. So there's, in this like multiplicity of like living beings in the planet, my language is exactly in the horizontal place where Zora's language could be. And it is in the same place that another kind of like expression can appear. So we're always in this impossibility of the symbolic, looking for other universes of reference, other possibilities of expression. And because we're looking for this, we're also looking for other possibilities of existence. And then I understand that I wasn't looking for cinema. I was looking for television. And that's the thing that I always keep working and telling you, that is why I'm looking for television. Because television is haptic, because television has a body, because television is in the middle of everything happening in the world and in the house, because nowadays television is really in everywhere, especially when we think like about expanded television. We have this in the devices that we're using, and they're sending messages to us and producing information the whole time. Those screens, they emit electricity, they emit like really things that touch our bodies and change the complexity of our bodies. So these things are much more interesting as micro-perceptions, producing folds and vibrations and contractions in the body, and maybe new organs and mutations than the moving images that we see in the cinema theater. Especially because in the cinema theater, and then we go in another elaboration, the cinema theater has this Cartesian perspective. That television, especially with the multiplicity of screens that we have and the sizes, is constantly playing with and is intruding in the ways that we are looking at images nowadays. For instance, Lady Gaga made this huge concert in Copacabana Beach like 4 months ago, and it was like 2 million people watching Lady Gaga, but all the huge screens for people to see her, they were not in the shape of cinema screens, they were in the shape of iPhones. It's brilliant. So everybody was watching actually this show, the concert, on huge iPhone screens. And I'm not moralistic with that. I actually find it's interesting for us to elaborate, because we're dealing with another capability of the image that is much more perverse and much more powerful somehow for us to deal with. And then I go to this like groundbreaking thing that is the background of it all, that is the 1997 episode from Pokemon, Electric Soldier Polymnia, when over 600 children in Japan had epileptic shocks. When we're watching this episode from the first season, we could say, I mean, there were no seasons in that time, but I mean, it would be considered the first season of Pokemon in 97. And this Pokemon that is called the Polygon is introduced. I keep talking about this because this is the event that allows us to think about this potentiality of the hapticality of the images. Polygon is this Pokemon that can cross from the virtual to the real world. And it's precisely on that moment that over 600 kids in Japan had epileptic shocks when Pikachu does the thunder shock. It could happen in all other episodes, but it was precisely that. Of course, neuroscience is going to debate that it was because the blue and the red were flickering too fast. But then it's something that Thomas Lamarre is going to argue against, but for us to think a little bit more with the unconscious, is we don't have laboratory conditions in everybody's houses. So how can we say that it's precisely because of the flickering or because of the antennas were transmitting a certain frequency that the kids had epileptic shocks? So there's a singularity that looks for a multiplicity that allows us to think in a different way of the danger of images. But if we look to these images in a moralistic way, we are going to stop watching them. And my interest is not that. My interest is like, how can we watch it more? How can we see the folds that those images are making? And then, with Susana Viegas, we invited Thomas Lamarre to talk to us I think this was the most important moment in my academic career, because I was already a psychoanalyst and I was receiving lots of patients. And when I got this position, I had to quit my practice because they wanted like exclusivity from my work. And I thought it was very important to do so, because I felt that I really wanted to go inside of academia again with all this new background that I was having after my PhD on bridging between Deleuze and Guattari and Lacan, because people are not really talking about this. When they talk about Deleuze, they're very Hegelians and they try to quit Guattari. And when they talk about Lacan nowadays, there is this very much like Hegelian thing that always appeals to a symbolic. And I said, but Lacan has given us several tools for us to think beyond the symbolic. So let's listen to Guattari as the most Lacanian one, and even saving Freud from himself as well sometimes. And then we invited, Susanna and me, we invited Thomas Lamarre at Nova. It was super interesting. He gave a workshop on electromagnetism, but actually it was on radioactivity. And he was thinking about like Godzilla, made by Anno Hideaki, that is the same director from Evangelion. And he was talking about this radiomancy of animation. It was a brilliant workshop during a whole Saturday, but the previous day on a Friday, it was raining like cats and dogs, purring. We walked with Thomas Lamarre from the restaurant to the Institute of Philosophy, and we were like soaked wet, but we had an interview with him for like 1 hour and a half, and I don't know, everybody got a cold afterwards, but it was great. And then this interview is in this latest issue that we published on the journal that the Institute publishes, that is called Cinema. It's after Deleuze. And in this interview, I asked a question to Lamarre. That is what I want to tell you now. That is the next step of unconscious television. So this was the whole thing, to go a little bit like what is going on now after all the anime productions, all the anime elaborations, or Twin Peaks that you can read in the unconscious television. That's the place where I'm going a little bit further on the deaf images producing this Schizo-Cogito, or the deaf images producing this epistemology of dizziness, not an epistemology of the lack. So if unconscious television had this as like an embryonic desire, I think I'm putting out further in the new works that I'm doing in this presentation. So I asked Lamarre about this, because in this book, The Anime Machine, he talks about Anno Hideaki, that is the director from Evangelion, the creator of the show and all the other films and everything that has on Evangelion nowadays. That's brilliant. I love Evangelion, even though we have like several Lacanian discussions on being too maybe conservative sometimes. But the question is, Anno Hideaki, when he was doing a test to get inside of the studio that would make Evangelion, he made a mecha suit, a mobile suit, that is a robot suit. That is a genre of Japanese animation. I don't know if you know, it's like Gundam, Evangelion is the ultimate mecha, and Macross. We have like very important animes on the mecha genre. But what he's going to tell me is that he was interested on debating why Anno Hideaki made the mecha suit, because he wanted to see how getting inside of the mecha suit would be a way of dealing with images. So in a way, using images as clothes, we can even say, as a hands-on thing, as a technological way of dealing with images, as something that it's going to be symbiotic with your body. He recalls the use in his book, The Anime Machine, of this drawing illustration for a Japanese will. So when people are going to build a will in this Japanese illustration, they don't show it as a Cartesian projection. They show it as an exploded will, because we need to see, instead of having the illusion of one thing after the other being like smaller and smaller. He wants us to think and to see how the shapes and the sizes of each piece are in relation with one another. So there is precisely the concept of assemblage. And that's how Lamarre wants us to see images. He wants us to see images as the mecha suits, as we are hands-on with it, haptical with it, producing images the whole time. And then my hypothesis, using images between the imaginary and the real as object A, that would be a huge torsion of the Lacanian concept. It is, can we think of a haptic unconscious produced with haptic images, hands-on images, instead of like this transcendent, linguistic, unconscious, based on culture, based on castration, based on the adipose familistic complex? That's a hypothesis there that I've been working on. Why to do that? Because that's the condition for us to break with the notion of narcissism. That's how we can, in a way, really libidinize the most important representation that we make, that is the image of the body. This hands-on image of the body, in a way, rescues even the critics that say that Freud was wrong when he was saying that anatomy is destiny. I can criticize this a lot. Well, Freud says that anatomy is destiny. So the anatomy that a person is born with is a question that this person is going to have for the whole time of this person's life. And Lacan is going to say, no, we have to look at with castration and elaborate on that, on the body-blooming effect of the symbolic and etc. But if we think on this hands-on libidinal production that is a secretion of the body constantly, maybe we can rescue the criticism that people do against Freud, and maybe think that really the question is always anatomical, in a way that we are always dealing with some kind of anatomy, because we are always investing on this hapticality of images. These images, they're always facing back and counterattacking ourselves, instead of always putting them in the symbolic. We are doing something that is like electrical, as we do with the bodying thing. And then we have this split of the being that Lacan is going to propose in Seminar 10, that is the seminar on anxiety. And it's a quick example of like how the individual or the being is formed for Lacan. We have the big other, that is the place of culture, and we have the subject, being that is not yet castrated, not yet bared by language, and they relate to one another. And then we have this bared S. This bared S is precisely what is going to analysis, is precisely what we are in our everyday lives if we are neurotic, for Lacan. This produces at the same time a bared A, that for Lacan is the unconscious. It is part of the other that you hold, that we hold within ourselves, and that is always bared to ourselves. What we have some kind of relationship with would be object A as the surplus of this operation. My question is, why and how can we always produce new unconscious instead of a communal one? So I'm always interested on producing new possibilities of unconscious, instead of having this like transcendent being that is in this operation of Lacan. How can we do this as like pulverized unconscious that are always going to do their own folds and contractions, instead of having this whole one that it's always going to be like in the practice of psychoanalysis trying to be heard? So how can we deal with something that we can actually not interpret and hear and go back to again? So maybe that's a limit of the clinic of psychoanalysis, because we're going to say no to its most important thing, that would be interpretation. So how can we, instead of working with interpretation when we're listening to someone, so we are not always going back to the big A, how can we actually be only neighbors of analysants, of people producing images, of haptically having hands-on productions of like emancipation and autonomy with their own bodies? So that's my proposition of like this Schizo-Cogitos. There would be like a new possibility of like epistemological approach of listening to agency and assemblage of this like people wearing mecha suits. Lacan proposes this diagram in lesson 2, and then he goes to this quotation that is brilliant but also very debatable, and I love it because, it gives the ground for all the debate. And then it's lesson 3, from Unheimlich to cosmology, that Lacan is going to criticize a lot of Levi-Strauss, and he produces maybe the best image of the narcissistic systems that he elaborates after Freud. Lacan is going to say that the most important part of narcissism is the jubilatory, this jubilation of the child looking at their image in the mirror, being confirmed by the big other. So let's go to this chart again, to this diagram again. So let's say that this is the fragmented biological being of a child being confirmed by this big other. And at this moment, both of them are going to be outside of the picture again. So that's the phantom and the ghastly thing appearing there. So that's the illusion that appears exactly at the same time that this jubilatory confirmation happens. That's neurosis. And that's the imaginary being like colonized by a symbolic. How can we decolonize the imaginary afterwards? And my hypothesis is that we colonize actually the Lacanian conceptualization, and we counterattack it with our Guattarian colonization. So we have this clash of forces, conceptual one. Then I just want to show you afterwards a scene of serial experiments Lain, which is an anime from 98. This turning from the 90s to the 2000s is brilliant. We have great stuff. And Lain's just 1 year later after the Polygon thing. And Lain is this girl. She's 13, 14. She lives her life like a teenage girl in Japan. She's kind of shy, but she has some friends. And then one day, a girl from her class kills herself, jumps out of a building. And this girl killed herself that starts sending messages to Lain through her computer. The question is, they don't use the term internet, they use the wired. So the wired would be this network of connections that afterwards we will understand that Lain has a very important symbiotic relationship with that. And Lain is gonna start to have this spiralization in relation to the wired after this episode with the friend, that she's going to become part of the wire. And she's going to be like a master of perverse metamorphosis and dominating the technology of the wired in a way that she's going to destroy the limits between the wired and the world. And then the theory of the anime produces its own elaboration of what the wired would be. And the wired is this connective place where you can access with computers. And for Lain, she wants us to access the wired without the necessity of computers. So in a way, the wired can become an understanding of the unconscious. But what is most important there is that Lain, during her schizo journey, she's always talking to a friend that she has that's called Arisu, that is Alice, we could say. So there's all this idea of Wonderland. And Lain is always telling Arisu, you don't need a body. You can give up of the body and become part of the wife. But then what's very interesting is that there's one episode that Arisu goes visit Lain, and Lain is a very I would say, even in a relationship with drug addiction, she's in a very intense symbiosis with the wire, with wire is connected to her and entangled with that. And it's very interesting because her room, it's full of water. So her room becomes like a data center. In 1998, it's very beautiful with all the machines. And when her friend Arisu goes to visit, one of the creators of the wired, that is this programmer that exists as a god or as a representation of what God would be, goes to Lain, appears, and start threatening Arisu, that would be her friend. And Lain was just a few moments ago telling Arisu, maybe you don't need a body. But at the exactly moment where her friend was attacked by this programmer being God, Lain starts verbally having an argument with this person, with this deity, with this programmer that wants to become some kind of despotic God. And Lain, her argument is precisely also necessity of the body. And that's so strange because it's paradoxical to the whole narrative. I mean, it doesn't make real sense, like everything that Lain was telling just minutes ago. And then she destroys God in an argumentation. So it's very strange because in the next episode, that it's the last episode of the anime, and it's called Ego. So the I-ish, in the translation, or le moi, Lain disappears. So she gives up her body, even though she defeated God by talking about the body, but Lain keeps herself as a presence among other people. So she meets her friend Arisu, and Arisu grew up, but Lain is still a teenager. And my hypothesis, thinking with this idea of like multiple unconsciouses, is that maybe instead of having this transcendent unconscious as culture and the bared big other or the bared symbolic, can we think that all these perverse relationships with like this technology and symbiosis and hands-on an image can produce several new unconsciouses? Instead of having one that is always going to fill the interpretation and our interpretative limits and desires. So maybe my idea is that Lain produces this concept of the crypt. So she disappears with her body, but she becomes an unconscious. And can everyone become their own unconscious? And that's beautiful. I talk in the book about that when I'm talking about Camp Pigs, but then now I'm exploring more and more this as this possibility of a Schizo-Cogitos, as this possibility of like an epistemology of dizziness, that would be an epistemology made with deaf images and small little particles of perception, so with nano-perceptions and something that is timely dispersed, or that like in a way produces like breaches in like a smooth line of understanding in the timeline of editing images. So there is a little glitch there. So how these micro-perceptions are things that we can hold and work with, so we can produce this like multiplicity of like singular but multiple unconsciousnesses in the plural. That's a beautiful diagram that I was looking again today from the anti-Oedipus. And it's very interesting because what Deleuze and Guattari can, once again, I really think it's Guattari there, is going to say is that there's this relationship between the body of Earth, of the landscape of Earth, and of the body without organs. And this immanent relationship there's going to produce like differentiations from Earth that is body, is a perverse composition. And that would be the schizoanalytic journey and the schizoanalytic potentiality for the clinic. Of course, I'm not looking at anime as an interpretation for Deleuze and Guattari, but Thomas Lamarre already saw it, and I'm just going like after him and going more into psychoanalysis with that. But what I believe is that anime, when it becomes so global, it defeats what would be like an interpretation of like Japanese culture, Brazilian culture, Portuguese or French culture. It becomes something that is like everyone can have a piece of it and produce their own pieces out of it. There's something in those potency of colors that attract the micro-perceptions that we can fold with, that we can like contract and vibrate, as Deleuze now is going to say in his book on Leibniz. And that is the basis for what is philosophy and the concepts of like percepts and affects and concepts. And then we have this image, a diagram that Deleuze produces for his book on Leibniz, that is like the monads. Can we think like monads, crypts, and unconsciouses? And the last thing of like my proposition is, so we have the monads, and let's say that monads are spaces of like agencement, spaces of assemblage. And the monads go in relationship with the world, and then it goes back, and then it goes back. It's an understanding that Deleuze is going to explore because of his reading of Foucault. I'm using this graph a lot because that's what I'm aiming to do differently from them. Leibniz's book is 87, Foucault book is 85 or 88. So he's writing them one after the other, Leibniz, Spinoza, and Foucault. And then what is philosophy with Guattari. And then there's Cosmology also. So all those books are being written together at the same time. For Deleuze, we have this place here outside of the strata. So the geological subtract of Earth, so this immanence of Earth and the body of Earth. This is the place of power. This is the place of like where power is going to like attack and counterattack. And something can get inside in this like zone of negotiation that is a very strategic zone. We can produce the strata, and this is the place of individuation or folds, le plus. So what's going to produce individuals? This is a representation of a volcano. It explodes, go to outside, have all the power struggles, goes back, it's cyclical. What I think tension Deleuze with Guattari and going a little bit beyond on Guattari, and I'm always using this image now because I'm really trying to operate with that, is to change the rotation of this diagram and use the anus of the President Schreber. So the Judge Schreber from the psychotic case that Freud elaborates with. That's the solar anus for another solar or like star system that Schreber is going to propose the whole time in his book that Freud is going to interpret. If we change gravity, that is precisely what Christian was talking also today, if we change the gravity of this diagram, we also explore a new possibility of conceptualization inside of the schizoanalysis. Because if we think that this goes cyclical, maybe we are still a little bit Hegelian. And I really want to get out of Hegel. I mean, it's a question for me, why it needs to be cyclical. So instead of being a volcano, this can be like an erogenous zone. So this can be the diagram of other libertinization of other worlds. So crypts can be machines to outer spaces. Unconscious can be produced in the effects of like monads within bodies. Because Deleuze is going to say something brilliant about Leibniz there. You need a body because this is a moral thing. You need a monad needs a body. Without the body, I mean, that's why the discussions of AI for me always get a little bit troublesome. And that's why I don't like Catherine Malabou, because she desexualizes it a lot. And she explores all the concepts from Deleuze and also from Freud in a way that it's problematic when you desexualize it, because you get the cyclical thing again. And we need to sexualize. We need to think with sexuality, otherwise psychoanalysis wouldn't be made. And when Freud is going to conceptualize the I, le moi, the ich, he's going to say there is this place of like where sexualization can be somehow overcome. But that's a problem. I don't know if we need like to evolutively overcome sexualization. I mean, we need to explore it in different paths, producing other virtualities. So maybe when the monads as spaces of assemblage meet the world, we need other lines. I mean, and Deleuze and Guattari, when conceptualizing the war machine, are going to do it. I mean, you need the lines of flight there. That's from 1,000 Plateaus, and that's from the chapter. It's not a chapter, it's a plateau. I mean, we can read down as the body of the earth from every piece or every place that you want to see a landscape. When you have the line of flight attacking a neurotic stratification of the individual, I would say, we can produce a non-cyclical possibility. And I don't know what the non-cyclical is going to do, but I'm here to elaborate and to listen and to be a neighbor of it. So how can we operate with this line of flight between the 5 and the 6 instead of going in this direction that comes? So number one would be the despot's face. and the place of the signifier for Lacan as this place of like the bared other and the bared symbolic that's going to like despiralize and produce a destiny somehow. How can we produce lines of flight that agency, they're going to like assemble other destinies, and then other maybe bodies that assemble other destinies, other anatomies that assemble other destinies, and etc. And then just in the end, this is a beautiful screen from an anime that I like that is Kill la Kill from 2013. And it's beautiful because it's all about fashion. And people, they have to wear those uniforms, and the uniforms extract blood from each person, but the person becomes very powerful because they are wearing the uniforms. And then there is this special uniform that's called Senketsu that can talk to this character, there's the main character, but only her can understand his language. It's brilliant, and she destroys everything. I mean, that's, and I'm closing with this, but that's the most important thing, at least for me, when I read Deleuze and Guattari and schizoanalysis. Desire is not the desire of the other. Desire is not desire for another big other. But above all, the specificity of desire is not the lack. That's an important part. What is important to listen in the psychoanalytic practice is this potentiality for revolution, that we don't actually know what's going to happen because the territorialization and territorialization are always operating together. So there's always ways of capturing things. So you can always like have another institution occupying the place that it was put empty after a revolution. So it's an always tense field that we have to operate. And for instance, in this revolutionary predicate of desire, we have to think with, for instance, Eduardo Verde Castro, when he's going to say that we have to be precautious when we get inside of the woods, when we get inside of the forest, because we don't actually know what we're going to become. And that's it. Thank you. I'm going to show you the moment that she fights with God. 1745.
レンが言ってること間違ってる。こんなに積みケーキがでも生きてるよ。レインもか私だってほらねドキドキドキドキドキドキどうしてかな。怖いからだよ。怖いからドキドキしてる。だってアリス笑ってる。うん、そうだよね。でも怖いの。ずっと怖かったの。なんでかな。なんでだろう。
肉体を失うことの怖いさ。感覚だって脳の刺激でドブに立って選げて。嫌な刺激なんか拒絶すればいい。楽しくて気持ちがいいことだけ選ぶがいいさ。
そうなのかな。レイ、誰かと話してるの？
その子が好きだったら、同志とつないであげゃ。
わかんない。レイ、誰と話してこってば？レイ！
あぐと。いいよ。時間をかけてデバッグしてあげるからね。さあ、レイ、おいで。
わかんないの。あなたのこと。神様。神様と話してんの。
わからない。なんかって言いたい。で。
あなたができたことは、ワイヤードかデバイスを解放すること。電話とか、テレビとか、ネットワークとか、そういうのがなくちゃ、あなたは何もできなかった。
そうさ。それらは人間の進化に伴って生まれたものじゃないか。最も進化した人間は、それにより高い機能を持たせる権利が。
その権利、誰がくれた？ 地球の固有振動にシンクロさせたコードをプロトコル7に組み込むことで集合的無意識を意識へと転移させるプログラム。それ、本当にあなたが考え出したことなの？
何を言いたいのだ。まさか、本当に神がいるなとか。
どっちにしろ、肉体を失ったあなたには、もうわからないこと。
嘘だ。僕はどうなったよ。僕が君をクロリアのアンヌに肉体化させてあげたんだもん。ワイヤーと偏在していた君。違うだよ。それに。
私がそうだとしたら、あなたは？
僕、違う。僕は。
ワイヤーで、リアルワールドで状態と。
どういうわけだ。
あなたは確かにワイヤードの神様だった。じゃあ、ワイヤードができる前は、あなたはワイヤードは今のようにできるまで待っていた。誰かさん、代理の神様。あなたには、一体なんと、ビミラーでしょ？